Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of Tuesday the 16th of July 2024. The East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any member of the public who is addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has otherwise been granted by the chair, and I've had no such request and granted no such approval. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend councillor meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public via live streaming. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If technical issues cannot be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. The East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai Kurnai Monero and Bidawal people as the traditional owners of the land that encompasses East Gippsland and our Shire, and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional owners have cared for and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders, past, present and future. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of the following criteria. Firstly, that they can hear proceedings and be heard by other members in attendance, and secondly, that they can see and be seen by other members. I'll now confirm with each councillor attending online in turn that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and note an assurance from each that the location they are participating from is secure to ensure that confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Van Diggle, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
And can you ensure the location you are participating from this evening is secure?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I wonder, IT, if we could turn up the online members' volume there to get over the rain. Thank you. And it is raining very hard here this evening for the benefit of you councillors online and anybody watching at home. Councillor Buckley, welcome to the meeting. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can.
And is the location you're participating from this evening secure?
Indeed it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 1.2 is apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. The only apology we have is for Fiona Weigel as the CEO. Clearly I'm not Fiona, she's unavailable this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And 1.3 is declarations of conflicts of interest. And I will now call from members of staff and council for any declarations of conflict of interest on matters that we'll be covering tonight. And I'll just start by saying that I have a conflict in matter 5.1.6. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll declare a conflict at item 7.2 in the closed council meeting.
Thank you. And Councillor Van Diggle.
I have a conflict of interest at item 5.1.7. I think. I haven't got it in front of me right now.
I believe that is correct. 5.1.7, the Paynesville structure plan matter. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to declare a conflict in item 5.1.6, as that matter includes change of zoning in the Mathesons Road area, which is where I reside.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Greeson.
Thank you. I have a conflict with items 5.1.1 and 5.1.2. Thank you.
Are there any further conflicts, councillors? I think that's a fair complement of conflicts for this evening's meeting. Thank you. Agenda item number 1.4 is the confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover to confirm minutes are an accurate reflection of our previous meeting? Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Seconded, Councillor Allen. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to that motion? Councillor Allen, is the motion opposed? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the... would anybody else like to speak to or for the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 1.5 is the next meeting of council, which is scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 6th of August 2024 at the Corporate Centre here at 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. That meeting will of course be open to the public and also live streamed. Agenda item 1.6 is request for leave of absence. CEO, have we had any requests for leaves of absence?
Thank you, Mayor. No, we haven't.
Thank you. 1.7 is our open forum. Councillor White, I might just afford you the opportunity to speak to your matter of condolence on behalf of council, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, it is with great sadness that I would announce to those here and anyone else online that very sadly Kim Ellis, wife of ex-councillor Dick Ellis, has passed away a few days ago, and just so much sadness in that she's been ill for a long time and she has really tried and fought such a battle. She's loved by so many, obviously by Dick and his children and their grandchildren. They'll miss Kim so much, but also in her working life, her devotion to the special school here in Bairnsdale West, where she absolutely adored teaching those young people an education, and the fact that she loved that job, but those children absolutely loved her, and it was a great relationship, and I'd seen her many times there, and the children, you know, just absolutely adored her. They would always be running around and she'd be playing with them, talking to them. So to you, Dick, and on behalf of council, I'd just like to pass on our condolences and say that we stand with you in your grief. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor White. And Councillor Buckley, you'd like to say some words also? Please go ahead.
Yeah, look, I would, thank you. Kimmy was a woman who always held herself with poise and grace. She was a beautiful woman who cared deeply for her community and supported her husband, former Mayor and Councillor Dick Ellis, in all of his undertakings. She was a proud mother to her children and deeply loved by her grandchildren. I and all that knew her are deeply saddened by her passing, and I wish to extend our deepest sympathies and support from the East Gippsland Shire and the community. For those lucky to have known her, they were richer for the experience, and her many contributions to our little patch on the planet were plentiful. I will miss our chats and her frank and fearless positions on everything political. She would make her views known with respectful conversations. I personally send my love to the family and friends of Kimmy, and we know she made a deep and resounding mark on the world. A creative woman who always dedicated her time to others, a kind woman. She fought hard for years battling her illness to stay with us a little longer and spent more time with her loved ones. We lost a special woman, and our thoughts are with you, Dick. Vale Kim Ellis. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. And our condolences go out to the family of the Ellis family. Agenda item 1.7.1 is petitions. CEO?
There are no petitions, Mayor.
Agenda item 1.7.2 is questions of council, and I believe there are several, starting with Mr. David Peel, Acting CEO. Would you mind reading that one if you have it to hand, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, there's four sets of questions for this evening, but I'll start with Mr. David Peel, who's asked me to read the question on his behalf. So the question is, in relation to the planning application for the subdivision at 34 First Parade, Raymond Island, what potential current and future liabilities might council incur on behalf of its ratepayers if it were to approve this subdivision against the EGCMA, or the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, referral advice and the council officer recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. And do we have an answer to that question, Ms. Elling? Thank you very much, Alba. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thank you for your question, Mr. Peel. Noting it's not appropriate for me to speculate on any particular outcomes, where it could be demonstrated that council made a determination contrary to a statutory requirements or best practice and/or scientific evidence, council could be held liable for property damage, unreasonable delays and/or injury. Any claims of damages due to alleged negligence in decision-making would be dependent on the circumstances of the particular case. It's probably worth noting that individual residents also have a responsibility to act in a responsible and reasonable manner during flood events. And finally, council continues to advocate for a state government response to inundation risks and climate response, which will improve the information available for decision-making and update the planning system, including zones and overlays appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Elling. And our next question is from Mr Maurice Borgelt, and I believe, Maurice, you're with us this evening. Welcome to the chamber.
Should be right. Okay, these questions are about Chinaman's Creek Marina, basically. In the mid-90s and early 2000s, council offered me to have 2 boats on mooring M1. Now, M1 is the number of the mooring in Chinaman's Creek. Following council establishing with the builders that the poles were okay for 2 boats, and if I paid for 2 boats. Why is council refusing to allow this now? And why is there a blanket ban on 2-boat moorings by the council?
Thank you, Mr Borgelt. We might see if we can get an answer from you there from Mr Paul Roney. Thank you, Paul.
Thank Mr Borgelt for his question. In our Marina's rules and regulations, it states a berth holder is permitted only to moor a vessel in their allocated Chinaman's Creek's berth. Advice I've received in relation to this matter highlights the concern of the load on the mooring poles and the jetty spacing within our marinas not being wide enough for safe vessel movements if sharing berths between 2 vessels has led to this ruling. In relation to your second question, advice shared in answering your first question is applicable to all our marina assets. I have confirmed that there are berth vacancies in the Meetung area that officers can allocate to you. I hope this can support you in mooring both your vessels in the Gippsland Lakes. Given the detailed and operational nature of your queries, I'm happy to arrange for the relevant manager to come and meet with you separately, if need be.
Sounds good. Yeah, second.
Please go ahead.
The count of the vacant moorings in Chinaman's Creek Marina this morning gives a 21% vacancy rate, which is much higher than the 2-year average of 9% stated at council's last meeting. What are the berth numbers of the vacant berths being put to the wait list? What is the time limit for wait listees to accept or reject a berth?
Again, thank you for your question. A vacant berth listing is due to the berth not having an allocated lease agreement. Vacancy rates are not directly linked to the number of physical vessels on site. This is due to a number of factors that could impact vessel length of stay. In saying that, there is a period of time identified in the lease agreement whereby if a vessel is not allocated the site, it can be leased to another party. This time frame is 3 months. I note that the considerations given for berth holders dealing with special and unforeseen circumstances. There are 7 berths being offered to the wait list at Chinaman's Creek Marina, and again, happy for officers to share specific berth number with you by email.
So what is the time limit for wait listees to accept or reject a birth?
So
That answer?
the time frame is 3 months. So the lease agreement whereby a vessel's not allocated site can be leased to another party, this time frame is 3 months.
Got the question. You're not looking at the question. The question was, effectively, reword it then. How long does a berth get offered to someone on the waiting list before they have to accept it or reject it? What's the maximum time?
Well, then if the question is changing, I'll take that on notice.
Well, that is the question.
So-
If you read it, what is the time limit for wait listees to accept or reject a berth?
As I said, I'll take that question on notice and we'll provide an answer to you via
Okay.
email.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Borgelt. I believe we have another question of council from Ms Susan Gilmore. Susan, are you with us tonight? Please come up to the big table. Welcome to the chamber.
Thank you very much. I'm completing a development in East Paynesville in 3 stages. Why can't I name the street after my late father-in-law? I thought by subdividing my land, it would be good for the community, being so close to Paynesville. This has been a risky process for me, and the fact that council have no flexibility with road naming has caused me most issues. The person I wish to name the road after is Reginald Daniel Gilmore, who was born in Omeo, was a police officer in Bendock, Bucket and Bensdale, all towns within East Gippsland Shire Council. The historic background to road naming in East Paynesville, just one mention, council adopted a policy that had continued over the 50 years where East Paynesville family names have been used for streets, courts and crescents and were created in open paddocks. There's one exception of this that has been named in the last 10, 15 years, which was East Coast Court, which was possibly named after a company that developed that site. The Gilmore family have been in East Gippsland region for generations, descended from and entwined with McCoy, Haylock and McDougall families who tie back to early Omeo in the 1860s. Reginald was born in Omeo on the 20th of October 2010. He has 4 brothers and 1 sister, and there are also still many descendants of James, his father, living in East Gippsland Shire. James actually was a mayor of the Omeo Shire at some stage. Reg joined the police force.
Sorry,
and was appointed-
Ms Gilmore, did you have a question of council this evening?
Yeah, my question was, why can't I name my street after Reginald Daniel Gilmore?
Okay, thank you for the question. We'll try and get an answer from officers for you. Ms Johnson?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, thank you very much for the question, and you know that we've been working extensively on this particular issue. Look, we are the naming authority, and you know that, but we're also guided by the Geographical Names Victoria rules. And so part of the principles of the rules are connection to a particular place and commemorative naming. Unfortunately, for this particular one, the connection wasn't established to East Bairnsdale, but the connection was absolutely established to some of the places that you just mentioned there, being Buchan and Bendock. I know that we've had various meetings with you trying to work through how we can find the best solution to this one, because I do absolutely, and Council absolutely appreciates the legacy that you want to honour here. That's not lost on us in any way. As you also know, we've offered another option which will sit within the Buchan area from a commemorative naming perspective, and I'm more than happy to continue having conversations with you about that one. But unfortunately, we can't. The particular name, even whichever way we looked at it, it just can't fit within those naming rules. And we checked that with Geographical Names Victoria as well, and they came back and confirmed that that was the case.
Yeah, but you are the naming authority, basically. You're the people who say yes or no, basically, at the end of the day. When you say you're referring to Reg Gilmore being something named after in Buchan, the family of Reg Gilmore do not want to have that name done in Buchan. Buchan is a small community. All communities, small communities, look after each other, do everything together. So that is something they would be embarrassed about.
Yeah,
Thanks, Ms Gilmore, and I appreciate your frustration in this matter, and thank you for asking a question. We do have a very full agenda, so I'm going to move us on now.
Sorry, I didn't hear that last bit.
We do have a very full agenda, so I'm going to move us on now. The question that you've asked has been answered, and as you'd be aware, you are quite within your rights to continue the discussion with council officers, but I'm not going to allow you to continue to debate officers on the matter right now because we've got a very full agenda to get through. Councillor Buckley, did you have a question of clarification there?
Yes, I did. It's a matter of procedural. It's a procedural question. Are the Gilmore family able to take this matter to VCAT to find a resolution? Would that be the natural course of process?
Yes, Ms Johnson.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. It's a very good question, and that is exactly what we've worked with the Gilmore family on. So the next port of call for this one is writing to the Minister, because the Minister of Planning is the only one that can overrule this particular decision at this point, or go outside the rules, not overrule, can go outside the rules of Geographical Names Victoria.
So that is an option that could be pursued, but that is not a decision that we'll be making here this evening. Councillor White, I see you've lit up. Do you have a question of clarification there?
Yes, excuse me. Yes, I do, because I discussed it earlier, you know, so as I could get my head across all the things that were being discussed. Now, in Sue's address here, she's mentioned Bendock and Buchan and Bensdale. So in other words,
Incorrect.
he served in Bensdale. Now, I'm now sort of linking East Bensdale with Bensdale. Why? Because he's been a serving officer in Bensdale, why does that not get a mention now? Because that should give it roots to name the street in Bensdale, Gilmore Street.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor White. Look, and I do appreciate the question. We have. My understanding is that we have looked at all of those options and looked at the connection against the rules. And as I said, GNV have said that the rules have been interpreted correctly. I'll let Ms Gilmore talk to what she discussed with GNV as well. But the connection to the principle at face value wasn't there, according to us and according to GNV.
But it sounds like there may be some opportunities for us to pursue this through another course, which is not to be dealt with in this forum right now. So we appreciate your question, but I am going to move us further down the agenda. So thank you for coming this evening, Ms Gilmore.
Thank you.
To agenda item 1.7.3, which is public submissions, and Acting CEO, I understand there are a number of public submissions.
Sorry, Mayor, before we move on, there is one late additional question.
Oh, okay, very good.
If I might. Sorry, so this question I was asked to read out. I believe Rosalie Woodhouse is here, but she's asked me to read the question in any case. So the question relates to the matter we've just been speaking of. I'm disappointed that Gilmore Crescent, on the subdivision of 22 Lucknose Street, East Bairnsdale, land belonging to Susan Gilmore and my late brother Roger, this is a privilege that Sue wishes to honour our father. And the question is, why was my letter, which was hand-delivered on the 20th of May, not responded to?
Thank you.
Please go ahead, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, all I can offer is my apologies for that. I'll have to go back to the team and check why we haven't responded to that. I know that we'd sent an interim response, but we should have sent an official response to you, so I can only offer to take that one on notice and find out why, and offer an apology for you not receiving a response formally.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item 1.7.3, which is public submissions and requests to speak, of which we have several. Normal convention would have it that we will have people speak at the item as it's listed on the agenda. CEO, that would be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so following that convention, we'll just move down the agenda to 1.8, which is items to be tabled. Are there any items to be tabled?
No, Mayor, there are none.
Very good. And agenda item number 2 is notices of motion. And we do have a notice of motion from Councillor Greason this evening, but I note that Mr Ken White is here in person with the request to speak to Council. So Ken, if you would like to come up and speak to us about this notice of motion, you would be most welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Are we? Yep.
welcome to the chamber.
Thanks for that.
You have 5 minutes of airtime.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Just on that street naming stuff, if we get some town structure plans through later on in this meeting, we'll be able to name a whole suburb after Gilmore's possibly. Let's work on that.
I'll take that as a comment.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to this motion. Firstly, just wanted to make a comment. I think I've done so in this chamber before. My personal view is that allowing the public to speak for 5 minutes about this motion with 2 days' notice of the motion is not really democracy at its greatest, at its finest. So just wanted to put that out there, and
Noted.
no doubt we'll hear that this motion's not actually changing anything yet, that there's a whole lot of consultation to be done. But this particular motion is being put forward prior to any consultation with anyone, from what I read. It's just the personal views of a single councillor. In this motion, Councillor Grecian, who may not be here beyond our elections later this year, wants to influence the rating system, let's call it beyond the grave, so to speak. Clearly, whilst this motion itself may to some seem innocent and is really just seeking further consultation and options for differential rating in the future, when you read the rationale, there is an undercurrent to Councillor Grecian's motion that is quite concerning. In the rationale, Councillor Grecian uses language such as increasing the discount for the farming sector requires the residential and commercial sectors to subsidise it. Both farming and commercial property owners can claim their rates as a tax deduction, homeowners cannot. Evidence of increasing homeowners in financial hardship applying for help, but not for farming or commercial businesses. Councillor Grecian has clearly formed the view that the farming sector, one, all make money as they can absorb the rate increase, having not applied for financial hardship. Number two, can claim a tax deduction for their rates, so that means that they can pay more. Number three, benefit greatly from increases in capital value, so why should they get an ever-increasing discount on their rates if their wealth is increasing? And number four, overall, are being subsidised by the commercial and residential sectors, and this is unfair. Let me share with all councillors, and particularly Councillor Grecian, what I believe is unfair. What's unfair is that we all talk about consultation and collaboration, which we don't actually do or don't do it effectively. Then we sneak motions like this into an agenda under the disguise of fairness and equity. Rather than many in public life now who take an emotive view of a subject and make decisions based on emotion, I'm a person who likes to gather the facts and then make an objective decision based on those facts. Some of the facts based on my little bit of research are this. In the last 8 years, total rate revenue generated from the farming sector in East Gippsland Shire has increased by 38%. In the same period, the rate increase applicable to the general residential sector went up by 36.2% and the commercial sector went up by just 12.3%. So if the farming sector is effectively being subsidised by the residential sector and commercial sector, why would the commercial sector rates only go up 12% in 8 years? We'll blame COVID and its impacts on the commercial sector, but we cannot forget that the commercial sector was the one that benefited the most from $360 billion of federal government support during COVID. This was not provided to the majority of the farming sector. Agriculture is the third largest sector of economic output in this Shire, so why should we not support it? You know, we seem to be suggesting in this rationale that we don't subsidise any other industry sectors. You know, we don't subsidise tourism or other industry sectors, for example. The average rate per farming property is $3,540 per annum in 2023 versus $1,301 for a residence and $2,527 for commercial industrial. So on a per property basis, the farming sector pulls its weight. East Gippsland Shire has chosen not to charge the full municipal charge for some years, which is something that I struggle with, you know, given that we've been subject to rate capping for some years now. Under the municipal charge, every ratepayer feels the pain, not just an isolated segment of it. Under our current hardship policy, an application for hardship is to be made to a review committee with full disclosure of income and expenses from all sources, family circumstances, etc., etc. as if a farm ratepayer who may be under hardship, they may be stressed, they may be already dealing with the banks, the ATO and Centrelink and others for support, to have to brief an unknown committee who, if they share the views of some councillors, may already have a preconceived notion of entitlement on the part of the farmer, to open up their lives to potentially be crushed by the process, let alone the outcome. I do question on the capacity for us to deliver genuine hardship applications. Have we considered, the East Gippsland Shire Council has an Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee, a voluntary group that was set up by East Gippsland Shire to have a conduit with its ag community, actually reviewed the rating system itself and made a number of recommendations to Council just last year. The committee received acknowledgement of these recommendations, none of which have been adopted, and clearly, based on this motion, we seem to have little awareness of their existence.
Thanks, Mr White. I might just draw you to a close there.
No worries. This motion should not be about officers preparing a report, because there's no consultation required for an officer to prepare a report, potentially make recommendations. And it's certainly become evident in recent times that it's unsavoury to vote against officers' recommendations. This motion, if it proceeds at all, should be based around seeking consultation from your community first. Then we write a report. We have an Ag Consultative Committee, we have a Community Consultative Committee. Why don't we use it? Or are those committees really there as just a charade for genuine consultation?
Thank you, Mr White. Councillors, we'll now move on to agenda item 2, at 2.1, which is notices of motion. As identified in the agenda, Councillor Greason has a notice of motion at 2.1 relating to rates and financial hardship. So I now call on Councillor Greason to move their motion, please.
So the motion that I wish to move is that Council notes the financial hardship policy is currently under review, requests that officers prepare a report to Council prior to preparation of the draft 2025-26 budget and its release for advertising and community feedback, outlining ways in which Council's financial hardship policy can be amended to further minimise the impact on ratepayers who may be experiencing financial hardship, evidence and options used to set rating differentials across the existing 3 property classes, and consultation options available for Council in relation to the setting of rates and in particular differential rates.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. And do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Allen. Thank you. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've put the motion for 3 reasons. Firstly, that Council considers the number of ways to help ratepayers who are in financial hardship. Secondly, that Council considers available evidence for options used to set rating differentials. Thirdly, that Council looks at ways to ensure that ratepayers in East Gippsland understand the rating system and that this is completed in time for the 2025-26 budget next year. So firstly, people need help if they're ratepayers who are in financial hardship. We know that thousands of people in East Gippsland are being supported every week by St Vincent's de Paul, the Salvos, the food banks and others. Some of these people are homeowners who have to pay rates and they're struggling to put food on their tables. Some are employed but not earning enough to pay their mortgages, their bills and put food on their tables, who are now called the working poor. Council's financial hardship policy is being reviewed, which is necessary because the costs of living have risen exponentially since it was written in 2020, and so many more people are struggling to make ends meet. Council needs to do as much as possible to help ratepayers who are struggling and minimise the rate's impact on them. I've listed in my rationale a number of ways that could be considered as part of the review, but there are some of those things that could be looked at and undertaken separately and soon, such as looking at the Council's website to make it easy to navigate for people seeking help, working with financial counsellors for their advice, etc. Secondly, I think we need data in order to ensure the decisions made about the differential rating are evidence-based. We don't have data that tells us how many people in each property sector are struggling financially. What we do know is that hundreds of people apply to Council for support to pay their rates, and at this stage they're all residential ratepayers, not from farming or commercial sectors. This does not mean that no one in these sectors is struggling, but we don't have information about this. We've been giving the farming sector relief in their rating for years, and this may well be justified, but we don't have evidence to back the extent of rating. My concern is that we don't exacerbate hardship for those people in residential and commercial sectors, but we don't have the evidence what we're doing is justified. So I've asked that officers provide the evidence and options for setting rating differentials across the 3 property classes. And again, that would provide information for next council to prepare the budget. And thirdly, people need to know why council sets rates the way it does. Rates make up approximately half of the council's income and are essential for council to continue to operate. We need to be certain that ratepayers understand, in particular, how the differential rating system works, why it's been established and how it affects them as ratepayers. I've therefore requested officers provide the council with options for consultation with the community, how it might occur to ensure that people do understand and hopefully support council's rating system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I think that with any policy, from time to time, they need to be reviewed. And at least in the last 4 years, there's been no review of our rating policy. I don't think any of us completely understand how we got to the differentials, the support and that we have. So I think that it's a healthy step to review this and for the next council to be able to understand why things are where they're at and if any changes are necessary, whichever way they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Oh, I'm not sure. That was very close. I'm not sure who got there first. Photo finish.
Mayor, I had a question, please, rather than opposing the motion. I had a question of officers, if I may.
Go ahead.
So my question is aimed at trying to understand if this motion was supported by council this evening, what the what the effects were and would be, and whether there are any negative effects in particular. I can think of some positive ones, but I'd like to hear from our officers whether, as we have got a review of the financial hardship policy underway, I believe that work has started. So if we pass this notice of motion, what effect would it have on that work? Would it simply duplicate the work? Would it add to the work? Would it detract from the work in some way? I'd like to have a response to that, please.
Very good. Sarah, you're in a position to do that?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Uri. Very good question. Look, what is highlighted against the hardship policy element of the notice of motion is in train, I suppose. So it supports and bolsters that. And again, we're asking for a report, so we're not going to say that every single component of it may or may not become part of the policy, that it is a council policy. But some of the elements of it we are already doing, and some of the elements we are considering as part of the review that we're doing currently on the hardship policy, which needs to be done, and we fully appreciate that.
So some, not all. There are other elements that won't be covered by the policy review at the moment that the notice of motion would address. Sorry.
No, thanks, Councillor Uri. That's a good question. All of the elements that are in there will be considered as part of the report. I can't say that every single element that's in there will form part of the hardship policy that will then come to council for consideration. But it certainly won't put a roadblock in place for what we're already doing in terms of reviewing the hardship policy for council's consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Johnson.
Councillors, I'll again ask if the motion is opposed, and Councillor Reeves, you have suggested that it is. Would you like to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, and pardon me. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Greason for bringing the matter to council, and I think the purpose of this notice of motion is noble and should have good intention. But I've considered the implications and thought about process. I cannot support it at this stage, but please allow me to explain. My concern is that the current hardship policy, pardon me, is currently under review, and we should allow free and unfettered ability of officers to undertake that review. And that goes to the heart of your question, Councillor Uri. I feel that there are aspects of this notice of motion that could include an unintended predetermination of the outcome of that review. There is potential that this notice of motion may even give rise to unintended direction of the outcome of that review. And I would prefer officers' time is utilised as efficiently as possible to be able to undertake the review without being potentially distracted by another report having to be undertaken in parallel. I would consider that this notice of motion be held off pending the receipt of the hardship policy review, considerations of the recommendations therein, and put them to the community and advisory committees for consultation. The Council at some stage in future needs to receive and digest the recommendations of the hardship policy review, and on that basis, Council should then form an opinion on the way forward. And for those reasons, I cannot support the notice of motion at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor White, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to point out in the three categories of rates that we have in place at the moment, that there are poor people in every group, but there are very, very wealthy people in every group. So to start playing around with who pays what, you may actually have to go to a means test, because I know that in East Paynesville, and certainly not picking on East Paynesville, but certainly that's one of our poorer suburbs, people certainly would be doing it tough. But there could be somebody who lives in one of the inner city of Melbourne suburbs that also has a weekender on the canals in Paynesville. Do you think you want to give them a rate reduction? I'm all for the hardship policy, because that is the way to get people to come forward when they're in trouble. And there would be small business people who are certainly in trouble, just opening the doors of a morning and hoping somebody comes in so as they can make ends meet. But you also have Bunnings in Bairnsdale, you have Kmart, you have banks, and they're at the other end of the spectrum. So do you think they need a rate reduction? The rates that they pay would be negligible in their bookkeeping. And of course, even with farmers, there are some farmers who are doing quite okay, and there are a lot who aren't doing very well at all. In fact, those people that I know who actually keep an eye out for farmers just find the farmer sitting at the kitchen table with all the unpaid bills in front of him in total despair. But sadly, they won't come forward. Perhaps it's something to do with them being very proud, but they won't come forward to divulge that they're in trouble. The bank's probably knocking at the door also, and the way things are, there are people in every category who are doing okay, and there are others who are doing very badly. And I just might remind the whole council group that for the 4 years, we talk about rate hardship, but for the 4 years, this council has taken the opportunity to command the full indexation, or what's the word, Sarah? The rate cap, taken the full rate cap each year, which has only added more hardship to those people. And may I remind you, Councillor Greason, that you ran for council saying that you were going to freeze rates. And
Councillor White, could you just confine your commentary to the notice of motion, if you don't mind? Well,
that's what I'm just saying. It's about the fact that probably this has been inflicted on people by this council group with making these rate charges go up every year for the past 4 years. And so we've not helped the cause at all, but I'm just saying that in terms of a review, there are lots of other people other than residents who are in strife. And I think you've got to open your mind up to that fact. And as Councillor Reeves has said, let the officers complete their task. And as at the last meeting, I asked the question about the hardship policy, digging deeper into it. And yes, it exists. But sadly, with the hardship policy, the interest may be waived, but at the end of the day, and the time frame might be put out, but at the end of the day, those poor people still have to pay rates in arrears. So they will still have to pay. They may not pay interest, but they still have to pay that bill. And that's the real problem, because you get hardship this year, you get 3 years to pay it, you have a hardship next year, 3 years to pay it. You will never catch up. And perhaps inevitably, council puts a second mortgage on your property, which is not what we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak for or against the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak against the motion this evening. I do acknowledge Councillor Gresham's intent that it comes from a good place, and there are elements of this notice of motion that I do support. However, the rationale, in my view, has missed the mark. I think it's singling out a sector that provides by putting food on the tables of the working poor, that are the backbone of our region. And when we look at the statistics provided by Mr. White earlier, it's clear that the commercial sector only having an increase by 12.3% would have been the more obvious target. So I do believe that I can't support this motion at this time, although I will look forward with interest to see the body of work that we will undertake in regards to the hardship policy. So good try, Jane, but not good enough.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to speak briefly in support of the motion. In considering as much as I can all the elements for and against, I think on balance the intention of this motion is good, and I think if it doesn't deter from the work of the review of the financial hardship policy, which I think is a key piece of work which we all agree on, I think the intent and the wording of this motion would see us gaining more information and data behind and rationale behind the different levers that we have, even though they're fairly limited when we set the rates. And just to respond to Councillor White's comments about the rate cap, that was a decision of the majority of council. The budget has been passed. So I think to go back and re-prosecute those arguments isn't the job of tonight. I don't see that there's any risk of unintended direction of the officers in their review, and I certainly don't see that there's a risk of binding the next council to a certain course of action. I see this notice of motion will provide the next council with more data on which to make good decisions about the rates and the budget for next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Last but not least, Councillor Stowe, please go ahead.
Perhaps we saved the best to last.
Possibly.
But I doubt it. Look, I agree with what Ken White said. We are doing this beyond the grave. It's not up to us. It's up to the next council to do this so late in our term. We've only got a matter of weeks to work, and I think it's better left to the next council to make the decision if these issues are going to be resolved.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. I think everybody's had a go, so I might go back to Councillor Greason, the mover of the motion, for your right of reply, Councillor. Please go ahead.
Find the button. Look, thank you everyone for your input. I must say, Ken, I'm a bit disappointed that you only see the negative, but I do see this very much as seeking an evidence-based approach to a rating system. I do acknowledge that people in every of the three property sectors, there are people who are suffering, there's no doubt about that, but we don't have the evidence about that. We've got the data that you've just given us, Ken, which is fine, and that's about, the fact that we know that that rates for farming properties have gone up much higher. The Valuer General's determination is, and I don't understand that, and maybe one day I'll understand it, but I don't now. But the point I'm making is that we need an evidence-based approach to setting these rates. And the other point is that I think we need to be transparent about it and accountable to the whole community. And so that's the main purpose. The fact that the financial hardship policy is under review is excellent, and I didn't know that when I first propose this notion of motion. And I think that my suggestions in there, which have come from talking to financial counsellors about the impact of rates on community members, I just think that their ideas and their thoughts and their suggestions that council officers may take on. And I agree this won't come back to this council. We don't have very much time before we go into caretaker mode. But I do think it's a big ask to a new council to go through this before the next budget, and I think that they would gain from having the evidence, and they would gain from the community having had some input. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. And I think what we do now is put the motion to the vote. So I'll ask for all those in favour. And all those against. And how did that go? 5-4, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So we will now move on to agenda item number 3, which is deferred business. CEO, do we have any deferred business this evening?
There is none, Mayor.
Agenda item number 4 is councillor and delegate reports. And councillors, just remind you, as previously agreed, we will submit, or you are encouraged to submit your reports in written form for inclusion in the minutes of this meeting. So we won't actually hear from any of you directly this evening. Which moves us to agenda item, sorry, CEO? Councillor Van Diegel's just stepped out momentarily, but I'm guaranteed she will be returning shortly. It is a requirement that we can see and hear councillors, hence that concern there. So we'll now move on to agenda item 5.1.1. No worries, thank you, Councillor. No, I don't think so, Councillor Stowe. This is a planning permit application 5/2023 454.1 for a 2-lot subdivision building works for a second dwelling at 34 to 36 8th Avenue, Raymond Island, which falls under the Place and Communities Directorate. Councillor Stowe, you have something to say?
Yeah, look, I think it's important that Councillor Van Diegel hears this report and briefings, and if it means in her current state she needs a toilet break, I think we should afford her that and come back in a couple of minutes' time.
Yes, Councillor Stowe, thank you for putting it in those terms. I am inclined to agree with you. So we might just take a temporary adjournment for a couple of minutes to afford Councillor Van Diegel the time to do what she needs to do and then to be present. And here she is. So on with the show.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your gracious allowance to make use in the bathroom. Thank you, I'm back.
Very good. So item 5.1.1, planning permit application, 2-lot subdivision at 34 to 36 8th Avenue, Raymond Island, within the Directorate of Place and Community.
Sorry, Mayor. First, we have 2 speakers to this item, so we might...
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
We might invite the 2
Acting
speakers.
CEO. We will invite the 2 speakers to this item. And first up, we have...
Ms. Jennifer Mason.
Jennifer Mason-Jeffries
sorry,
online. Jennifer, you're online with us. Welcome to the East Gippsland Shire. We can see you. Can you see and hear us? Good evening, Jennifer. Can you see and hear us, Jennifer? No, it would appear we're having some IT complications there. Good evening, Jennifer. No, look, we might just pause Jennifer there and go to our next public submission. And Jennifer, we will come back to you if you can hear us, which is Kate Young. Welcome to the chamber, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If you would like to make your presentation.
Certainly. So
Please
Jennifer and my client and her husband Andrew are my clients. They're going to give you some context about the personal considerations here, but as I'm a planner, I'm here to talk to you about the planning considerations. And so the officer assessment that's in the council report tells you that this proposal complies with the general residential zone, it complies with the bushfire management overlay, the design development overlay gets a tick as well, and it doesn't trigger consideration of the vegetation protection overlay because not a gum leaf is harmed, no koalas going hungry because of this subdivision. Now, the floodplain manager in the report also states that there is no risk to this property under existing or future climatic conditions. So there's a very helpful diagram on page 65 of the council report that reinforces that. This refusal recommendation tonight is a single issue, and that's of egress. And the CMA say that the egress route will encounter flood-prone land and that it's reliant on the ferry for egress. And as you know, you can't drive across McMillan Strait. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But residents of the island will tell you that the ferry can go out at any time, and it does. And they're well prepared for such events. There's an SES document that is specific for Raymond Island that informs you of the hazard and the need to plan ahead. And there's more than adequate lead time ahead of a flood event on Raymond Island to leave or to get sufficiently resourced in order to stay. So if you're a resident of the island, whether you choose to leave or choose to stay, you're going to be safe. We say there's far greater risk associated with bushfire or the questionable reliability of the ferry than there is from a flood on Raymond Island. So if the single issue is egress, egress to where? I live in Eastwood. When there's a good flood down here, I can't get to Bairnsdale. Should we close down Eastwood? Egress, flood events are normal to East Gippsland. It's something that we live with. So I'll take you back to a decision, a VCAT decision on Shaving Point in Meetung, where the VCAT member said, where is egress to? It's not to the CBD of Melbourne, it's to high, dry ground. And you can achieve that on Raymond Island. It doesn't mean that you're going to need to automatically get to the mainland. If you have everything you need, then you can stay put. And you can stay put on this land and stay dry. Inundation's not a new issue to us on the Gippsland Lakes. It predates any discussions about the impacts of climate change. I'm not here to debate that. I agree with the science. But we live and we breathe it. We plan and we adapt accordingly. So if council adopts the officer's recommendation, what does that mean for our other coastal towns? What about dwellings in Malakuta, Bem River, Meetung, Eagle Point? What about council's continued investment in waterfront infrastructure like the Esplanade in Lakes Entrance or Squatters Row in Paynesville? Why are we wasting that money if we believe that this is the case? The community and council's well aware of the challenges of coastal living. It's all about adaptation. So the application before you is an additional modest dwelling and for the subdivision of a pattern that's entirely consistent with the surrounding character. What we're asking for here is nothing new. It's not the tip of the iceberg. It's one additional 2-bedroom dwelling. Mr. Mayor, I heard you only yesterday on ABC radio talking about the housing crisis we find ourselves in. What is the harm of one additional dwelling? So I urge you to think seriously about the implications of this recommendation this evening. You should not be making policy decisions on the fly. I understand that the planning department needs guidance to enable them to make consistent and informed decisions, and I understand council continues to advocate to the state government to try and make a statewide decision on some of these things. But I encourage you to invest in developing a local policy to inform the community to ensure decisions can be made appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Young. Now, Jennifer, it's your opportunity to speak now. If you can hear me, you please turn your microphone on and you have our undivided attention.
Mayor, if I may, Jennifer, can you hear us online? No, it doesn't seem like there's any connectivity as far as audio goes.
Yeah, we did do a test run with Jennifer earlier today and I'm assured that it did work. I'm not sure what to do under these circumstances. Could we call Jennifer possibly? I think maybe Kate's doing that right now. If everyone else is happy just to bear with us for a minute. Give Jennifer the opportunity to present her views. She appears to have got the call. And
Do that?
oh, that's a
Is
shame.
that better?
I'm happy for a hybrid solution, absolutely. If you want to put Jennifer on speakerphone and we can
put you on speaker and
put
you
her
can
up
relay
against
through
the
my phone,
microphone,
okay?
whatever
Take a deep
works, I
breath.
reckon.
They're all very nice here.
Oh, sorry.
Turn what?
Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
Do I talk through the phone?
How's that? So
Okay.
let's just do a test first, Jennifer, to see if the online councillors can hear you.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Gemma.
I think you've fixed the problem. You've unmuted your mic, or maybe she's muted it back again now. I don't know why.
No, we'll just continue with the phone, Kate. So thanks, Jennifer. I don't think you can hear us, but please go ahead.
So talk now, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, CEO and officials. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight, glitches as they may. My name is Jennifer Mason-Jeffries. My husband Andrew, who cannot be present tonight, and myself own the property at 34 to 36 8th Avenue, Raymond Island. We appreciate your consideration in the matter of this property's subdivision. I will be brief, however, I am a little nervous, so I'm reading from prepared notes. Andrew and I purchased the said property in September in 2006. Andrew was born in Bairnsdale and has always had the pull to return to the lakes after retirement. The reasons for us requesting this subdivision are fairly simple and are as follows in no particular order. The property as it stands is over 2,000 square metres. All or the vast majority of the blocks on 8th Avenue are approximately half that size. By dividing the property in half, there would seem to be no difference or impact in the average size of the block in the street. As our block has two allocated numbers, 34-36, it should not be difficult dividing and allocating a number to each block. As Andrew and I are ageing, and you can tell that by me not being able to do this technology, we may require smaller and more accessible holiday home. We wish to downsize. We wish to build more environmentally and eco-friendly property, a home that is well insulated. The State Government of Victoria speaks to the point of a severe housing shortage in the state. Selling the property at what would be 34 8th Avenue puts another house into the property market that could be ideally suited for a family. We understand that this may not be at the forefront of the mind of the council, but as community-minded people, we think it's the right thing to do. Renting out this property to a family, as we did in the early days of ownership, does not now suit our current situation or requirements. As to the flood, bushfire and access issues, we fell in love with Raymond Island because of its wildlife, especially the koalas and, believe it or not, the ferry. In almost 20 years that we have owned the property, we have never been nor felt trapped by flood or fire event. And as most of the people on the island have, we have a plan if something happens. Life is simple on the island. It makes us happy. It makes our grandchildren happy, and we love to share what we have. We wish to teach them about our good fortune and the responsibility that comes with that of owning a property on Raymond Island that one day may be theirs. We just want to keep our lives on Raymond Island simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
no questions, I think, so thank you.
Very good, and thanks, councillors, for staying with us to make that hybrid situation work. So I believe we'll now hear from officers.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elling.
Mayor, and through you. Councillors, before you is a report seeking to issue a notice of refusal to grant a planning permit, for a two-lot subdivision and buildings and works for a second dwelling at, as you have heard, 34 to 36 8th Avenue on Raymond Island. In accordance with the Planning Delegations Policy 2023, the application is reported to Council for matters of policy consideration. Key points in the report for your consideration are: the application has been made subject to notice and no public objections were received. It was referred to the CFA, who supported, and also the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, or EGCMA, who object to the grant of the permit. This objection from EGCMA relates to egress from the site in a 1 in 100 year ARI flood event exceeding 0.8 metres floodwater depth over the surface of roads, which is the maximum acceptable tolerance. The assessment of the proposal is that it complies with all the objectives of the General Residential Zone, the Bushfire Management Overlay, Design and Development Overlay 11, and the Clause 56 residential subdivision of the planning scheme. However, in relation to the land subject to inundation overlay and the planning policy framework, it is assessed that the proposal does not meet the policy and objectives and should not be supported. The report details the history of previous considerations given to the issue of infill subdivision in coastal settlements, including Raymond Island. In recognition of the clear policy guidelines set by state government and the recommendations of EGCMA, this recommendation is based on the best available evidence and the need for Council to respond accordingly. Therefore, the Officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of refusal to grant the planning permit, subject to grounds outlined in that recommendation. Also present with me this evening is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning and Development, and Robert Pringle online, Coordinator Statutory Planning, to answer any technical questions. The report is presented for your consideration, councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I have a question it's a pretty broad question, but it's an obvious one when we go in to consider these types of issues. The state has one policy that's very clear to local councils and rural councils in general, that we must address the housing shortage issue and do it with gusto. However, on the other hand, we've got some, policy legislation that's not fitting in or helping that process. So my question is, in these circumstances, does state policy trump what's happening with, with, say, the Catchment Management Authority's position on certain issues?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. It's a very good question, because you've struck right to the heart of the planning decision-making process, which is about balancing competing priorities. So there will always be the need to balance different policy positions, and in this case, as you stated, Councillor Buckley, there's obviously a general strategic direction and policy direction that we need to provide houses for Victorians, but within that, we need to provide houses in places that are safe. And that's fundamentally what the Balancing Act is about. So it's not really a question of one policy trumping another, it's a matter of trying to arrive at a decision which comes to a reasonable balance of those policy considerations. One item that we apply, particularly with bushfire, and to a lesser extent, I suppose, it applies with flood, is that risk to human life comes above all other things. I think, as the applicant has pointed out, probably the risk to human life issues with a flood on Raymond Island is not as severe as a wildfire in the forest. And again, those considerations have to be taken into account. But I'd just conclude by saying that the question before council is what is the appropriate balance of the competing policy requirements, and that's the challenge of making planning decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you. Mayor, if I may, just a sub-question. In
Sure.
regards to the information, thank you. In regards to the information that I was seeking during the briefing period in regards to the foundation principles of the scientific evidence of sea level rise and change, I appreciate that the CEO, acting CEO, sent me some information, and considering we had a 1,000-page briefing, I haven't got right through into all of that, but I'm still yet not to be convinced that this is just based on a model, these forecasts. So I just wanted to I guess, thank the acting CEO for giving me that information. I'll delve further into it, but I'm still not convinced that the argument's sound. So it's more of a comment.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. I might just afford the CEO or somebody a response to the statement if they want.
Through you, Mayor, just to clarify that the recommendation and in fact the consideration in this matter aren't based at all on predicted sea level rise. They're based on, yes, modelled flooding, but modelled flooding based on evidence from past flood events. So the flood mapping that's provided that shows the depth of the egress is accurate and can be confirmed by people's experience in 2007. So just to clarify that this recommendation is not based on sea level rise predictions, it's based on flood mapping and experience with flood events.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Sonia. John, please go ahead.
My question's around this on page 65, where you have your flood levels, and the deeper water, 0.8 metres, is all along the foreshore and where the ferry would dock. Then the next one is up to 0.5, and then you have one that's less than 0.5. Now, in that whole map, and the block is clearly identified, it isn't shaded at all. So therefore it's not going to be subject to flooding, but all of the people who live on Raymond Island right now are all going to be stuck when it reaches that 0.8 on where the ferry is and all along the coast. So how is it you can say that this particular block it's not safe to build on because they're going to die? I can't agree with that because it clearly shows on this picture that that block in itself just doesn't even come near a flood zone.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. I'm sorry, we're not saying that at all. We acknowledge, and the report acknowledges, that the lot is outside of the modelled flood area, and the entire discussion in relation to flooding is to do with the inundation of areas outside of that site. So we're not at all saying that this house will be inundated. We're saying that the advice from the CMA is that where an egress requires someone to travel through 0.8 metres or more of water, then they will oppose the applications. So in this case, it's not that the house itself is at risk, it's that people leaving the house in whatever event would be at risk, and that's the advice that the CMA have provided to us.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions? Councillor Stowe, please go ahead.
Yeah, look, looking at the map on page 12, if they have to leave the house, I think they only have to walk across the road to get above the flood level, but that's not my question. The state government, don't they have suggestions with regard to infill, and wouldn't this fit into an infill block?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, yes. And again, as I said before, there is an intention that we should encourage infill, and a report again quotes the recommendations from the recently adopted Housing and Settlement Strategy, which says that small towns like Raymond Island should be encouraged to support a modest amount of infill. But again, in our Housing and Settlement Strategy and in the state policy, those things need to be balanced against all the other risks, environmental, safety, and a range of other risks. So we don't just take one policy position and say, let's build houses everywhere. We are required by the planning scheme and by our other statutory requirements to consider issues associated with risk, with landscape, with streetscape, and a whole range of other things. Again, I just want to emphasise, and as we've briefed the council on this, this is not black and white. and we are relying here on the advice of the Catchment Management Authority. This is not my staff putting up a recommendation based on what we think. It's based on state policy and it's based on the advice of a referral authority.
Thank you, Mr Richardson. Councillors, further questions of officers? No, I see none, in which case there is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Reeves, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Uri. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors and officers. This is a challenging decision for me, and there's clear tension between the issues of housing provision and the planning provisions and policy. There's no doubt about that. However, the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority's referral objection, I believe, cannot on this occasion be ignored. While I appreciate there are tensions created by the application, and that's really apparent in the report, I really see and feel that, and that the planners have really grappled with that, and I think that they've explained that tension really quite well in the report. But I think that, and there are aspects of the application which I think really clearly align with the provisions of the planning policy framework. But on this occasion, to me, the advice of the referral agency sways my decision, and therefore I support the officer's recommendation to refuse the application due to that recommendation from the EGCMA. Thanks, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Not sure. I think I just need to say ditto. I've considered this very carefully. I find it very difficult. It's one of those really tricky decisions that councillors have to make. I really appreciate the personal story from Jennifer. I can relate to that totally. But in this case, on balance, I'm going to vote to support the officer's recommendation because I think my first duty is as a councillor to make the best decision I can, and in the face of what East Gippsland Catchment Management has to say, and the use of increasing strength in their language, I think, about these flooding risks. And they are particular ones to Raymond Island. I understand that it's probably not a life putting lives at risk, the flooding on Raymond Island. It's a different type of flood to that, but I think it's not the place to have infill development, even though that's also an incredible tension and demand for our council at the moment. So on balance, I'm going to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I can't support this motion because it is totally inconsistent with other decisions that we've made in relation to Raymond Island completely. And the fact that of all the referral authorities that it was referred to, everyone said no problems except the CMA, and they're only a referral authority, they're not a determining authority. So it's not advice that we have to take. And as I think Kate pointed out, there's plenty of dry ground left on Raymond Island in a flood event. So there is no danger to life. And in the recommendation at C.4, it says it's likely to increase the amount of flood damage to private or public or private assets. I don't see how this subdivision that's above flood level is consistent with that. So I intend to vote against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, would you like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor White, please go ahead.
I'd like to speak against it also. Similarly, now this map has been explained to me, it's nothing to do with sea level rise, it's to do with floods. Now, when there is a flood in the lake, it does take some time to rise. So in the event of a flood, anyone that wants to leave the island before the ferry is stopped has every opportunity to leave. Those who wish to stay, they're not going to come in harm's way. So, and from that, there's never been a flood yet in the lakes. that hasn't been followed by subsidence, where it just water goes out the entrance and we're back to normal. So nobody's life is at risk, and certainly in that position where that house is to be proposed, it's not even appears that it's never ever been or will be flooded. So I can't agree with this the decision.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, look, I wish to quote from the movie The Castle. Daryl Kerrigan, terrific actor, he states, "The law of bloody common sense. A man's home is his castle." Daryl Kerrigan's law of common sense is becoming increasingly rare commodity in Australia when it comes to dealing with property rights. In recent years, there's been a gradual but significant erosion of traditional protections for private property rights. The recognition of importance of private property rights can be traced back to the Magna Carta. The link between private property rights and the protection of individual liberty, and also the protection of property rights, has long been seen as part of the legitimate role of government. Now, I may be channeling my late father when I make this comment, but however, it's an important one. The poorest man may in his cottage bid defiance to all the force of the crown. It may be frail, its roof may shake, the wind may blow through it, the storm may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. All his force dares not cross the threshold of a ruined tenement. And the reason why I've stated that is without property rights, there is no way to check the power of the state over the individual. When the state gains control over property rights, the ability to create wealth stagnates or even declines, thereby creating poverty and misery rather than freedom and wealth. So I can't support the officer's recommendation of refusal. In my view, the applicants should have the right to build, especially in a time of housing crisis and shortages. The importance of encouraging building should be a priority of the Shire and of us as councillors. I support the applicant because this is their private property. It's their rights, their individual rights. Councillors making decisions that have a major effect on a person's wealth and asset base, which is sometimes based on flood mapping. Yes, in this case, it's been proven that that's not going to affect this particular property. So I think it's unfair to suggest this, and I think that it's against a fair go and a person's individual liberty. And I've stated all of that just so that you know, Mayor, that will be my argument in throughout these proceedings this evening when it comes to talking about land usage. So thank you, Mayor, for your time and patience.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Stowe.
Kirsten might have wanted to go first, did she? I'm not sure. No? Okay. Look, I can't see any advantage or disadvantage in having this house built there. I don't think it affects anybody really, and I don't really think it affects the people building it. It's a similar situation to me to what we approved in Carpenter Street Lakes entrance. This council approved that, and I can't see any difference here, so I'm opposed to the motion too, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Reeves, I believe you get right of reply.
Yeah, look, thank you, councillors. Thanks for all those contributions and considerations. I think that the discussion actually goes to the heart of the tensions that this particular matter brings to us. I think the notion that this is inconsistent with other decisions made in planning, there's no precedent that each application is viewed on its individual merit, and we need to be reminded of that. That's really an important planning consideration. And I agree and absolutely acknowledge that it's a referral agency, not a determining authority, but it's pretty good advice, and we should seek and receive and act on that good advice. I think the notion that this land subject to inundation overlay advice needs to be considered not just on the current considerations, but it's on the future and legacy decisions that we're making. And so what will it be like in 50 years' time? And that's my consideration. I also point out that Kerrigan was also fond of the smell of two-stroke. And we've moved on from two-stroke, and I think two-stroke motors are banned these days. So, You know, we do actually move on and we make decisions based on good current advice, not, our dreams of the past. And we should be directing development councillors into the right places as per our housing and settlement strategy. And on this occasion, it's probably not the right place for the reasons that have been provided in the report. But thanks for your consideration and the discussion, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And all those against? No, I'll just confirm, Councillor Van Diggle, you are abstaining.
Yes, Mayor, I should have spoken earlier. I'm just in two minds about this whole thing. So I'm going to be an abstention this time.
Okay, I'll just seek some governance advice on where the vote falls in that case.
So, Mayor, so an abstention is taken as a no vote. So the effect is we have 4 votes for and 5 votes against.
So the motion is lost.
The motion is lost.
I don't think it can be 5-4. There's only 8 of us here, isn't there?
That's correct. It's 3-4. It's 3-5.
3-5. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think we have a result and the motion is lost. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.1.2, which is another planning permit application, this time number 5, 2023.
Excuse me, Mayor. Just
yes,
a point.
Councillor Reeves.
If that motion is lost, can I just have some clarification on what the next stage is in that particular matter then? And for the benefit of the applicant and those around the table.
So, councillors,
certainly.
At this stage, there is no decision. So there is no decision to approve, there is no decision to refuse. So there is no decision currently. Councillors will have discussion with you at the upcoming briefing and then determine what the way forward is, but at present, there is no decision.
That is the outcome from the vote we have taken just now. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. We will now move on to item 5.1.2. Planning permit application 5/2023 356.1, a 2-lot subdivision and removal of native vegetation at 34 First Parade, Raymond Island. In the Directorate of Place and Community, Ms Elling.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors, before you is another report seeking to issue a notice of refusal to grant a planning permit for a 2-lot subdivision and removal of native vegetation at 34 First Parade, Raymond Island. In line with the planning delegations policy, the application is reported to Council for matters of policy consideration and following a planning consultation meeting held in March 2024. Key points for your consideration, councillors, are that the application has been made subject to notice and 9 public objections were received. It was referred to the CFA, which support it, and the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, EGCMA, who object to granting of the permit. Notice of the proposal was also given to DECA, who support the grant of a permit with conditions. The objection from EGCMA relates to the egress from the site on a 1 in 100 year ARI flood event exceeding 0.8 metres floodwater depth over the surface of roads, which is the maximum acceptable tolerance. The assessment of the proposal is that it complies with all of the objectives of the General Residential Zone, the Bushfire Management Overlay, Design and Development Overlay 11, and Clause 56 Residential Subdivision of the planning scheme. In relation to the land subject to inundation overlay and the planning policy framework, it is assessed that the proposal does not meet the policy and objectives and should not be supported. The report details the history of previous considerations given to the issue of infill subdivision in coastal settlements, including Raymond Island. In recognition of the clear policy guidelines set by state government and the recommendations of EGCMA, this recommendation is based on the best available evidence and the need for council to respond accordingly. Additionally, the report responds to concerns from objectors about the perceived loss of natural and native vegetation that would occur through the grant of the permit. Although the removal of native vegetation includes consideration of all on-site vegetation based on consequential loss, the proponent argues only a few trees are to be physically removed to enable development of the newly created lot. The recommendation considers that this does not suitably respond to avoidance of removal of native vegetation and that a permit should not be granted. Therefore, the officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of refusal to grant the planning permit subject to grounds outlined in the recommendation. Also present is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning and Development, and Robert Pringle, Coordinator Statutory Planning, to answer any technical questions on this particular report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? John White, please go ahead.
Yeah, my question's possibly, and backtracking a little bit, that perhaps with the mood and the feelings towards these applications, that perhaps we should have had an alternative motion in place. So I'd ask you, Sarah, because we've failed to make a determination on the last one, and where that goes next is possibly even straight to VCAT. I don't know. So just asking the question about what would be the right procedures to have in place for a very similar application.
So, councillors, you'll recall we've covered this previously in terms and provided you with the opportunity to seek that. We haven't had a request for an alternate. So I think that's a matter for councillors to work their way through.
Thank you, Councillor White. Are there any further questions, councillors? No, in which case we do have a motion on the table. Do I have a mover? Councillor Reeves? No. Okay, happy to see Councillor Mendy Yuri move that, seconded by Councillor Reeves. Has I got that correct?
Correct.
Yes. Councillor Yuri, would you like to speak to the motion?
I don't really have much to say. I think the way I've considered this planning matter is similar, I think, to the last one, with the added consideration of the potential loss of native vegetation in this one too. So I have I've weighed it up in a similar way. I think as a councillor we need to take all the latest information and advice into account when we make our decision, because otherwise we might be exposing our citizens to risk, or our council, in fact, to litigation. I think we have an obligation to weigh up these matters very seriously. But in this case, again, it's a matter of weighing up the need for infill development and also the risk of flooding of the egress. So in balance, I sit with the recommendation of the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Yuri. Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Yuri. Another challenging decision and again, continued tension apparent in the report, and it challenged me again in terms of my desire to promote economic development and growth, but also, I think there are those challenges apparent with this application and the provisions around the planning policy framework and the requirement to actually protect our community and make good decisions for the future. And my considerations resonate with the issues from the previous application, and I'll appreciate that there'll be a variety of views and interpretations of this report around the table. But on that basis, I support the recommendation provided by the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Is the motion opposed? Councillor White.
There are quite a few similarities with the last proposal, but I do note in this, similarly the CFA are on board with it and other authorities, but the question of vegetation, it's also provided in there that there will be offsets provided. Is that correct, Martin?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor, yes. So there is some vegetation that would need to be removed to make way for a dwelling, but because of what's referred to as the consequential loss, a lot being created less than 2,000 square metres, it's presumed that vegetation is lost. Just need to be clear that there's just some trees to be removed, that all of the vegetation will be offset, and not all of it will be removed. So even though it's called consequential loss, it doesn't mean actual loss. It's theoretical loss. There is some vegetation loss, but all of the vegetation to be removed, and in that fact that to be retained, will also be offset at the cost of the applicant. So it's not as if the whole site is going to lose all of its vegetation.
Okay, so that's actually a win, because they will not take the trees away, but they will also provide offsets for those trees that remain. So that's a good outcome.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, it's a part of a win. There will be some vegetation lost, but and the report does refer to the first principle around vegetation, which is to avoid, but then you've got mitigate, offset, and so it is in accordance with the appropriate policy for native vegetation removal.
Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to speak against the motion for similar reasons as to the last position that I took. I do have a question of clarification, although, CEO, perhaps this is something that we should have discussed earlier about having an alternate or an amendment to the motion.
It is in fact something we discussed earlier.
Yes. And I would suggest that we make an amendment to the motion so that we can, that if this motion fails, that the application be granted.
We do have a motion on the table, so I believe what you would be doing is foreshadowing the intention to move an alternate motion should the motion on the table be lost.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr McConnell, you'd like to...
Just the advice thanks, Mayor. The advice I'd put to you is, given that no one has seen what that motion would be, and that a motion of approval would contain quite detailed conditions that are associated with the development, my advice to council would be that that's something that we would want to make sure there is time to consider that. Not so much for the drafting of it, we have information, but that it'd be something that councillors can actually turn their mind to and determine whether or not those detailed conditions are appropriate in approving it. And so we can give some further advice about the way forward after this evening, if that's what you wish to do.
Thank you, CEO. I'll take that guidance as a good way forward. Is it possible that the foreshadowed motion could set that in place so that we've got something solidified, so we know where we're going to next?
So can I suggest that your foreshadowed motion would be one to defer the decision to a further meeting, allowing us to make the appropriate another motion and appropriate considerations?
So Mayor, the motion couldn't be to defer the matter because the matter had been considered and voted on one way or the other. So it would need to be a motion setting in train a specific course of action. So as I indicated earlier, let's just turn our mind to the previous matter for a moment. The next step is we'll have a conversation with you about the steps forward from that point at the next briefing, and then set in train that course of action.
I'd like to make a comment that I don't think policy on the run's a very good idea at all, and these need to be sorted out prior to the meeting if there's going to be notice of motion. I think we should have a vote on this now and leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. What I am going to do is ask if anybody else would like to speak for or against the motion.
I'd like the motion to be put, please, Mayor.
Procedural motion, the motion be put. Do I have a seconder for that? Yeah, Councillor Stowe seconding that. Very good. All those in favour? We're putting the motion. Sorry, so just for clarity, we are now voting on whether the motion be put. All those in favour? Okay, we're certainly clear on that. Thank you, councillors. So I'll now ask for all those in favour of the motion. Yes, there is a right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
Sorry, just a point. But I think that with a procedural motion, that's really a gag clause, so there's no right of reply effectively.
I think you're correct. Yes, I'll just seek some
it,
advice to
Mayor.
make sure that is the case. Yes, it is. Okay, very good. So we'll now turn our minds to the original motion. I'll ask all those in favour. And all those against? And with the casting vote, I will vote to support the officer's recommendation. So that motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 5.1.3. Which is another planning matter, matter 523-464.1, use of land for sale and consumption of liquor, an increase in the red line area and patron numbers, reduction of car parking requirements. This also sits within the Place and Community Directorate. Ms Elling, if you could introduce the item for us, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, councillors, as the Mayor pointed out, the report before you is seeking to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for use of land for sale and consumption of liquor, increase red line area and patron numbers, and reduction of car parking requirements at 73 to 75 the Esplanade in Paynesville. In line with the planning delegations policy, the application is reported to council following a planning consultation meeting. The key points for councillors' consideration are: the application has been made subject to notice and 10 public objections were received. There were no external referral requirements. However, internally, the property and community facilities and open space teams were all consulted. The objections raised the public objections raised concerns about use of footpath along Devon Road as a licensed area and the impacts of local car parking. The concerns relate to the redevelopment of the area, including provision of public parking along Fleischer Street and pedestrian connectivity and amenity for the Raymond Island Koala Trail experience. It is considered that the amended application and subsequent conditions recommended appropriately resolve the concerns of the objections. Areas of proposed licensing have been reduced to the southern part of the Devon Road Reserve. It's also worth noting that the footpath trading occurs without significant disruption in pedestrian activity in other parts of Paynesville and Bairnsdale. In the amendment to reduce the area, the reduction of car parking part of the application also has a less detrimental impact on surrounding car parking. And for most of the year, there is not significant car parking demand in the precinct. The officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant the planning permit, subject to conditions outlined in attachment 1 to the report. Also present this evening is Robert Pringle, Coordinator, Statutory Planning, to answer any technical questions you may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions of a technical nature or otherwise? a very good report. I see no questions. There is an officer recommendation in the report. Councillor Allen to move, Councillor Stowe to second. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, I think that this application is going to bring something extra to Paynesville that's going to add to the attraction of Paynesville itself and for visitors going to the Koala Trail, because what nicer place to be on a nice sunny day than sitting outside enjoying coffee or a drink. So I think that it's going to be a very, very good thing for Paynesville.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I agree. It will enhance the town rather than anything else. It's done everywhere else in Victoria. There's street side trading in hotels in Bairnsdale, for example, very successfully. And as I say, this will enhance the area. As Arthur said, we can sit there and have a nice ale and have a look at the koalas going past on Raymond Island. It'll be fantastic.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Reeves, please go ahead.
Look, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, councillors. I remember this matter was subject to a PCM, and I feel that the concerns of the community members were resolved, and they were aired and able to be resolved, I think, through that PCM process. And it appeared to me that the activation of this site will be of benefit for residents, visitors, and koalas. While this sounds a bit puerile, it's actually, I think that it'll make the area sticky, make people be there longer, and the more people who value the koalas, the more protection they'll be afforded in the long run. So I'm really happy to support this.
Thank you very much. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Stowe, are you scratching or raising your hand there?
No, scratching.
Okay, very good. Councillors, if nobody else would like to speak for or against the motion, I'm happy to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.1.4, which is seeking authorisation and public notice of Planning Scheme Amendment C169E GIP to update the municipal planning strategy, planning policy framework and implementation of the housing and settlement strategy. Ms Elling, if you wouldn't mind introducing.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Councillors, before you is a report about initiating the planning scheme amendment known as C169 to update various elements of the East Gippsland planning scheme by incorporating council's adopted plans and strategies into the municipal planning strategy and planning policy framework. The officer's recommendation is that council agrees to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment and commence public exhibition in accordance with the Minister's instructions. Key points for councillors' consideration are that council is required to regularly update its planning scheme and must do so in accordance with state government guidelines. The amendment seeks to incorporate the key elements of previously council-adopted plans and strategies into the planning scheme to guide future planning decisions. These documents are the council plan, the economic development strategy, the environmental sustainability strategy, and the housing and settlement strategy. It is important to note that changes made through this proposed amendment involve updating local planning policy to reflect the adopted strategies, but council cannot make changes to the state planning policy elements of the planning scheme. A decision by council to seek ministerial authorisation is just the first step in the amendment process. Once the Minister authorises the proposed amendment, a formal public notification and submission process will commence. All submissions will be reported to council at the end of the process, and council will be asked to reach a position on any required changes to the draft amendment. If required, an independent planning panel may be appointed by the Minister to consider public submissions and make recommendations on the final form of the amendment. Also present this evening is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning and Development, to answer any questions of a technical nature. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alba. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Alba. My question relates to the consultation aspect of this proposal. If it goes through tonight, then and the Minister then approves it, it then goes out to public consultation. This, look, I haven't done the maths, but it's, 400 or 500 page document, this first one, and the others are pretty hefty as well. How on earth do we encourage people to read these documents and to have any sort of an intelligent say, not intelligent, that's the wrong word, but informed, thank you, informed say.
Yes, thank you. I'll refer that question to Mr Richardson.
Thanks, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. Yeah, we wouldn't expect people to read these, well, other than councillors, to read these documents. So we will be required, so they're very strict requirements for public notification which the Minister issues instructions, and they're standard for planning scheme amendments. We are required to put all of the documents on display. But we've already started planning the engagement process whereby we will do one-page summaries. Here's a quick explainer as to what this planning scheme amendment is about. Here's a map of Paynesville, or here's a couple of dot points about what the key changes are. We'll do Q&As, we'll set up a Your Say page and we'll do a road trip as well. And we'll have very simple information available for people saying, look, this is what the amendment's about, here's what it kind of covers, here's how it might affect you. We're not going to be providing people with a track changes version of a 300-page document and saying, try to understand this. We'll give them some really simple, plain English explanations as to what the amendments are about. Yep.
That sounds good, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Further questions, councillors? There is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that? Sure. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Second to Councillor Stowe. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak?
Look, thanks for that, Mayor. I think this is part of the procedure, and we need to get this to the Minister so that they can approve it and get it back so we can start the next stage as Manager Planning has described.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Stowe.
Exactly as Mark said, and it's good to see the issue moving forward, and good work, staff.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. Councillors, I will not be supporting the seeking of authorisation for the planning scheme amendments this evening, because I don't in principle support only some of the strategic directions of managing the growth or settlements within the municipality. Even though we've had lengthy consultation and this has gone through a process, first of all, I want to acknowledge the amount of work that's been done, and a lot of it is really great work. So I hope the officers understand that I'm taking this position to be consistent with my previous concerns that have been stated, probably ad nauseum in the past. So I won't be supporting this motion as it stands, although I look forward to the public having some, when it is passed, that they will have a really good engagement process to ensure that the amendments that need to be made will be done in due. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, I see no one. That's a legacy hand of yours still up there, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Reeves, you did move that, so you do have right of reply?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I appreciate Councillor Buckley's divergent point and values on this particular matter, but if we don't authorise this step, then we can't actually proceed with what I think Councillor Buckley is dear to Councillor Buckley's heart, and that is about public consultation. So we've got to get it out there so that we can get feedback from the community. So that's what this step is about.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. And with that, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe... And all those against? Just to confirm, Councillor Buckley, you are abstaining? Yes? And the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 5.1.5, which is seeking authorisation and public notice of a planning scheme amendment C170E GIP, implementation of the rural land use strategy. Thank you, Alba.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, as you mentioned before you, councillors, is a report about initiating the Planning Scheme Amendment C170 to update various elements of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme by incorporating the council-adopted rural land use strategy. The officer's recommendation is that council agrees to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment and commence public exhibition in accordance with the Minister's instructions. Key points for your consideration are that council adopted its rural land use strategy in 2023 following a period of public consultation which was rather extensive. The amendment seeks to incorporate the key elements of that rural land use strategy into the planning scheme to guide future planning decisions for rural areas of the Shire. The proposed changes to the planning scheme include incorporating new policy statements in the municipal planning strategy and local planning policy framework to guide land use, development and subdivision in rural areas, updating schedules in the farming zone, rural living zone and rural conservation zone to protect rural areas for farming activities and streamline decision making, introducing the rural activity zone and updating environmental significance overlay to protect farmland of strategic significance. A decision by council to seek ministerial authorisation, as previously mentioned, is just the first step in the amendment process. Once the Minister authorises the proposed amendment, a formal public notification and submission process will commence. All submissions will be reported to Council at the end of the process, and Council will be asked to reach a position on any required changes to the draft amendment. If required, an independent planning panel may be appointed by the Minister to consider public submissions and make recommendations on the final form of the amendment. As with the previous report, here this evening is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning and Development, for any technical questions councillors may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question. It's on it relates to page 1093 of our council notes. It's under the heading of diversified economy, and there's a statement there which seems completely out of step with most of our council documents. Alba, you explained to us that this is a state policy, but could I please have a comment about how that could be updated to more accurately reflect this council's position on those things?
Thanks, councillor, and through you, Mayor, yes, you're correct. The policy statement relating to something to do with coal comes from, it's a regional policy requirement, so it's put there by the state government, and it arises from the Gippsland Regional Plan, which was actually prepared in 2014. So there's a lot happened in the alternative economy and renewables, etc. in that period. We are required to retain that policy provision until some stage when there's perhaps another Gippsland regional plan that might be updated. Our intention would be, therefore, obviously it has to stay there, but our intention would be that through our advocacy and submissions on the state government's Plan for Victoria process, that we would put forward proposals for council's endorsement to make a submission to the state government to say that we actually need an update of the regional policy at the Gippsland-wide level, particularly in relation to renewable energy, etc. So that's the explanation there, and I do just note that whilst that is an anomaly within that policy framework, that we have updated various other sections of the local policy framework to reflect the council's own economic development strategy, and there are several mentions of renewable technology and adding value to manufacturing and vegetable growing, health, education, etc. So despite that anomaly, we have been able to make sure that we've captured the council's intentions in relation to its diverse economy into the future in other parts of this policy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions or officers? I see none. There is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Uri. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Greason. Thank you. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Not really, except that this is a critical step along the way of this process, which is taking a very long time. Thank you to the officers for all the work here, and we look forward to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greason.
Thank you. Just to reiterate what Councillor Uri said, and just that it was a long and slow process reading all of those pages. Thank you very much. and it'll be great to see it go out for consultation. Thank you.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I am just being consistent in my position in regards to the rural land use strategy. I believe that it flies in the face of people's as of rights. It's something dear to my heart that we have the right to do with our land. Under the provisions of...
Sorry, Councillor, I'll just remind you that this motion is about the planning scheme amendment, not the rural land use strategy itself.
Thank you for that bit of advice, Mayor, but I think it just, my point goes to the fact that I won't support this. However, I do want to confirm that Councillor Reeves' point of my position on community consultation and input is indeed true and correct. So I want to ensure that the community understand that by no means me opposing this motion is to impede that process at all. It's just a matter of me standing my ground in the position that I don't support the rural land use strategy as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, I see no. No, very good. In which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I did have a right of reply, I believe. But
my apologies. If you would like to exercise your right of reply, please do that now.
No.
Okay.
Thank you. On consideration, I don't need to say anything more.
Thank you for pointing out my
Thank you.
faux pas there.
That's okay.
Happily to acknowledge you did have a right of reply. But we will now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe the motion is carried. Thank you. No, and we will... yes, we do. And all those against? Yep, and the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. I have a conflict in this next item, so I'll just ask the Deputy Mayor to take the chair, please.
Deputy Mayor, may I ask a clarification on that last vote? I can't see all the councillors in the chamber of who voted which way. Could it please be read?
Yes, I'll ask the Acting CEO.
Just turn the mic off, Jane.
I'll just turn it off. Sorry, Councillor Buckley, I'll just ask the Acting CEO to read out the names.
So the record I've made is, and I'm looking at the manager governance as I say this, is that councillors White and Buckley voted against, and all other councillors voted for.
Thank you for the clarification, CEO.
Okay, so the Mayor has left the room. So this is item 5.1.6, which is seeking authorisation and public notice of planning scheme amendment C171E GIP, implementation of Eagle Point structure plan. Are there any speakers or no one here for...
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. No, not in relation to this item. In the relation to the next item, there will be, but not in relation to this item.
Okay, thank you. Ms Elling.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, I'll truncate the speaking points on this one because you've heard most of it twice already. Before you is the report about initiating planning scheme amendment C171, which is to update various elements of the East Gippsland planning scheme in relation to the Eagle Point structure plan. The officer's recommendation is that Council agrees to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment and commence public exhibition in accordance with the Minister's instructions. Key points for consideration for councillors are: Council adopted the Eagle Point structure plan in 2019 following an extensive period of public consultation. The amendment seeks to incorporate the key elements of that adopted Eagle Point structure plan into the planning scheme to guide future planning decisions for the Eagle Point Township. The proposed changes to the planning scheme include incorporating the new policy statements in the Municipal Planning Strategy and Local Planning Policy Framework to guide land use, development and subdivision in Eagle Point, rezoning of land from farming zone to general residential zone to accommodate modest urban growth, rezoning of land in Forge Creek Road from general residential zone to low density residential zone to respond to environmental constraints, rezoning of land in Matheson's Road and Forge Creek Road to protect environmental features and neighbourhood character, and introducing environmental audit overlay for part of the structure plan area. As mentioned previously, this is seeking council authorisation to seek that ministerial approval to commence the first step in the amendment process, and the Minister may consider an independent panel. Also present is Martin Richardson for any questions you may have. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Reeves?
Councillor Buckley.
Oh, Councillor Buckley, sorry, I've got to move this. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just have a question in regards to the farming land that's proposed in its zoning. Is that farming land high arable land or actively being farmed at present? And does this fly in the face of our rural land use strategy?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Deputy Mayor. The farming land is quite a relatively small part of the farm owned by the RU family. The land has been identified for quite some time as being a part of that Eagle Point sort of urban growth area. And as I said, it's a relatively small section. So the land is grazed with sheep, but it's far from highly productive. It's pretty wet and it's not particularly productive soil. But as I said, the portion of land that's proposed to be included in the rezoning is a relatively small area, and it's an area which is immediately adjacent to the existing Eagle Point Township area. So it's a part of the farm that's actually not used very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Mr Richardson, I remember the Eagle Point structure plan going through considerable consultation. It seems to have been going on for a long time. My question is there a point at which community gets consultation fatigue because it's then going to go back again? And this seems to have been a process that has come out of the community anyway.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the consultation fatigue is a part of my life, unfortunately. People say, why are you asking us again? Because we have to is the answer. But again, with this sort of process, with this and the Paynesville structure plans, what we'll be saying to people quite clearly up front is that this is work that we've done in consultation with people over a series of years, and there really shouldn't be too much to see here. But of course, as we know, as new residents move into some of these areas and weren't part of that consultation, some people may have different views than what the community might have had 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. So again, we'll try to make it as efficient as possible, and we'll try not to repeat too much stuff for people and have them go through a whole new process. We'll really just reiterate the fact that there's a plan here. It's been developed in collaboration with the community, and we're taking it to the next step.
Thank you. Councillor Stowe.
Yes, Martin. Excuse me. Martin, basically the plan doesn't include anything south of Paynesville Road. So where does that leave McTaggart's Road, Lake Victoria Road and properties? There's quite a lot of lifestyle properties around there and perhaps potential for subdivision there. Question 1. Question 2, is the large area of land between Waterview and Paynesville Road, which I think is part of RU's property also, that's to remain rural, I guess. Could I just have an explanation on that, please?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So in relation to the land south of Paynesville Road in the McTaggart's Road area, that's all, or pretty much all in the rural living zone. As part of the housing and settlement strategy, Council adopted a view that we should review areas of rural living throughout the Shire, because in some places there are 8 hectare minimum lot sizes, and in others there are 2 hectare minimum lot sizes. So one of the strategies that we have there is to have another look at those rural living areas and see whether or not a simple change to the schedule might actually free up some more land for more lifestyle properties. In relation, yes, to the land north of Paynesville Road between Waterview and Eagle Point, Albert Ayu's farm, there's been a consistent position held by Council for 20 plus years that we need to maintain a separation between the townships of Paynesville and Eagle Point, and that rural vista that exists as you drive and looking over Lake King should remain. Having said that, though, I suppose that, the trade-off, if you like, here is that part of that RE property is included in the Eagle Point Structure Plan for development, and of course significant parts of the former RE farming land to the east of Grandview Road have been included in the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan. So I think there's a general consensus that we've struck the right balance there, and that we will retain that really magnificent rural vista looking across Lake King, whilst allowing for some rezoning of land which was previously in the farming zone.
Just don't quite understand why it's retained. It's not viable farming anymore because it's only a comparatively small block of poor quality land. Wouldn't that be better off residential?
There are significant planning principles around the retention of land in rural areas, not just for farming purposes, but for landscape purposes. So it's not just a question of whether the land is highly productive farming land, but whether it serves a scenic or landscape value as well. And in this case, that's the main reason for retaining it.
Okay, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Van Diegel.
Thank you. This probably, it's a question obviously for Eagle Point, but it counts for both Eagle Point and Paynesville. Can I just have confirmation that the proposed amendment doesn't block community access to marine and coastal Crown land? And also, are we probably 2 parts of the question. Are we going to find ourselves in a situation where the planning application in the future is going to be, I guess, rejected by the CMA, given that we're looking at building blocks in Eagle Point and Paynesville, which are land subject to inundation as well?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Deputy Mayor. No, there's no change in relation to the Eagle Point Structure Plan that will affect coastal and marine or coastal areas. Obviously, the main coastal areas along around Eagle Point are either already developed on Bay Road or are retained in public reservations further around towards the silt jetties. So the Eagle Point Structure Plan doesn't make any change at all to the management of those coastal areas. And also in this case and in the Paynesville case, neither of the structural plans proposes development within areas that are subject to inundation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of officers? No, thank you. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Allen. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Would you like to speak to the motion?
I think it's all been said previously, Deputy Mayor. It's all part of the same process, and I think we need to get the process happening.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves?
Ditto. Thank you.
Ditto. Thank you. Is the motion opposed? No, I can't see that it is. Would anyone else like to speak for or against the motion? No? Okay, we'll put it to the vote. Those for the motion, please. So we have Councillor Reeves, Councillor White, Councillor Van Diegel, Councillor Buckley, Councillor Allen and Councillor Stowe. And Councillor Gleeson. Thank you. And would someone like to bring in the 2 councillors?
Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to jump out because the next one I have a conflict of interest for.
Thank you.
And Vanessa will call me back in. Okay, perfect, thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and councillors, for your patience. That must bring us to 5.1.7, and I believe we have Kate Young to speak to this item. Welcome back, Kate.
joined online by my client, Liz Ronson from Resi Ventures, and in the gallery by Tom Camp from TLC Unlimited, and Ken and Tom from CCW, and their consultant, Courtney Campbell from Development Solutions. We're here tonight to present a unified front on the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan, to commend Council and Council officers for their work to date and their collaborative approach to this planning scheme amendment. So the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan, or PGASP, was adopted in August 2016. Back then, Donald Trump had just been appointed the Republican candidate wannabe. Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, and Marianne Pells was the Mayor of the East Gippsland Shire Council. So quite a bit of water under the bridge since then. So we've... none whatsoever. None whatsoever. But what I'm trying to convey is there's been quite a variation in both our community and our leadership since August 2016. So what we've been on a journey with Council to try and update some of those underlying principles to test them against today's community and to make sure that what we're pushing or championing here is going to have good consistency with where our community wants us to be today. So the landowners fully support this rezoning because it's been a long-held plan of Council, having been adopted almost 8 years, sorry. It is clear strategic alignment with Council policy. We all know we're in the midst of a housing crisis, and this particularly of the 4 amendments you're looking at this evening, this one is going to be the one that's going to hit the ground running the fastest and alleviate that short-term supply, and will also provide housing diversity to support growing families. It's development ready, the services are there, so we can genuinely provide supply as soon as possible. So we want to get this happening as quickly as we can. And as such, because it's almost turnkey ready, it's low cost for Council because it's an in-sequence development. The landowners are ready and they're motivated to deliver on this project, and they've shown their support and desire to expedite rezoning by many of this work is developer-led, developer-funded. Council hasn't had to put their hand in their pocket to update any of this information, and it's being the can is being carried by the landowners. And they'll continue to do this through a development-funded development plan process, with the target being to have development ready as soon as this amendment is gazetted. So as such, we request Council support by being ready as you can be, so that as soon as you get the green light from the Minister, please let us go to exhibition. Happy, if anyone has any questions, we're all here. We're happy to help.
Thank you, Ms Young. 5.1.7, seeking authorisation and public notice of planning scheme amendment C172 EGIP, implementation of Paynesville Growth Area and Structure Plan. Thank you, Alba.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Yes, as you mentioned, this is the report about initiating the planning scheme amendment C172 to update various elements of the East Gippsland planning scheme in relation to the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan. The officer's recommendation is that Council agrees to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare the amendment and commence public exhibition in accordance with the Minister's instructions as per the previous 3 reports. Key points for consideration are that Council adopted, as Kate mentioned, the Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan in 2016, following an extensive period of public consultation. It's worth noting that minor updates to the structure plan have been made over the past 6 to 12 months in consultation with landowners and the Department of Transport and Planning. The amendment seeks to incorporate the key elements of that adopted Paynesville Growth Area Structure Plan into the planning scheme to guide future planning decisions for the growth area. The proposed changes in the amendment include new policy statements in the Municipal Planning Strategy and Local Planning Policy Framework to guide land use, development and subdivision in the Paynesville Growth Area, rezoning of land from farming zone to general residential zone to accommodate planned urban growth, introducing the development plan overlay to require landowners to prepare a development plan for Council adoption prior to subdivision and development, introducing a public acquisition overlay to facilitate intersection improvements to 25 Waterview Road, Eagle Point, And finally, introducing the environmental audit overlay for part of the structure plan area to ensure appropriate investigation of potentially contaminated land. As per the previous reports, the decision by Council to seek ministerial authorisation is just the first step in the amendment process, and if required, an independent panel can be established by the Minister to consider public submissions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Reeves,
Yep.
please go ahead.
Quick question of officers. Thanks very much. And this question probably applies to all of these last few matters, and that is just a sense of the time frame on going to the Minister, getting authorisation and getting back and out there, as I'm sure proponents are chomping at the bit.
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. A reasonable guesstimate would be we'll get letters off to the Minister on Monday. I have to wait for the 3-day cooling off period. We're hopeful, because of the pre-work that we've done with the department. They've been up and down the line checking that the form of this is appropriate. They're telling us that this will come back from the Minister in relatively quick time. Now, I can't say whether that's a month or two, but I'm saying probably a month or two. That means that then we are potentially very close to election period, and my understanding is that we are unable to go to public exhibition on an amendment during election period because it falls into that category of things that are significant matters of public interest. My expectation, probably more realistically, is it'll take 2 or 3 months for the Minister to get back to us, because there'll be a pile of paper on the Minister's desk of similar matters. If that's the case, then as soon as we are out of the election period, we would be going out to public comment. That'll be in, let's say, early November. And so we can either do a 28-day or a longer period, because we'll be getting close to Christmas anyway. Our hope is that we will come out of the public comment period in about February, and that we'll be in a position to report to Council on the outcome of the submissions. So my best case scenario would be coming back to Council in February, or let's say March, with the submission process, and then getting straight back to the Minister and saying, here's our position on this, can we get on with the panel?
Thank you, Mr Richardson. Councillor White, please go ahead.
That was going to be my question about why it's taken so long, but now you've worried me because you're suggesting there could be a rescission motion.
I did not suggest that for 1 minute, through you, Mayor. I just said that we can't act on a council decision until the expiration of, I think it's 48 or 72 hours, so that's the way it goes.
Further questions, councillors, of officers? No, I see none. Thank you, Councillor Reeves, and Councillor White beat you to it there, Councillor Stowe. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think that everybody here is in furious agreement. This is our strategic growth area, and for good reason. It's the right place for development. So let's get cracking on this as soon as we can.
Councillor Reeves, Councillor White.
Yeah, I fully agree. This is being worked on for a long, long time. I remember one of the first items when I got on council, and here we are. It's maybe just about to go to the Minister, so I'd really look forward to the date when there's a shovel in the ground and we can start to see some new properties available in Paynesville, because there is not much available there anymore.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And a sigh of relief from the gallery. Not yet. 3 days, huh? 3 days. And welcome back, Councillor Van Diggle. Agenda item 5.2.1. Thanks, Tom. Marina Consultative Committee Terms of Reference, which sits with Mr Rooney this evening. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled Marina Consultative Committee's terms of reference, which is seeking Council is Committee of Management of the Crown Land and Infrastructure Operation Association with Meetung, Chinaman's Creek and Slip Bight Marinas. The facilities combined have 435 berths, of which berth holders pay licence, permits and operations and maintenance fees to Council to berth their vessels at these sites. In 2007, the Council's Marina Consultative Committee was formed as a result of the berth holders requesting a forum to address their services needs direct to Council. The terms of reference for the committees are scheduled for review every 4 years. The most recent review was completed last financial year and included consultation with berth holders, current committee members and the governance team. The Council's MCC terms of reference is presented in this report for adoption. Key points for the report for Council to consider are the key changes from last terms of reference that include formatting, clarity on charter and duties, a change to the quorum numbers, a member participation clause, key guiding principles. The Council's MCC terms of reference is presented in this report for consideration and adoption. We have noted a couple of minor typographical errors, typographical changes in the attachment. Vanessa will now show them on screen for clarity about the version that's going to be approved.
So community was inserted. And also just clarity that it's a three-meeting cycle rather than meetings within a 3-month period.
Also present tonight is Chris Wayne, Manager Council Enterprises, who is available to respond to questions of a technical nature. This report is presented to you for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome, Chris. Councillors, are there any questions of officers in relation to the Marina Consultative Committee report? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chris, probably more a comment. I want to thank you for finally getting to this position where we've had some sort of resolution and we've got to this part where I, having formerly been a part of the Marina Committee, understand the importance of that community consultation process. I suppose my question is about what was your take on where this landed, and there was obviously some amicable, solutions found to moving forward and progressing the way that it has.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. What we did with the review this time was we looked at other less formal formats for consultation, following some advice from berth holders and officers, and we tested that through consultation with berth holders and then through the committee. What we found was the committee as a group believed some of the key items that we discussed needed a more formal consultation process and needed to have a clear terms of reference to ensure that those items were discussed and passed through the council process appropriately. So with that, we went back and consulted with the committee on a more structured terms of reference which supports the needs and service needs of the berth holders, but took away some of those topics that are more of a council form and procurement topic that was taking up some of the time within committee meetings in the past.
Okay, thanks very much for your work. Appreciate it, Chris.
Further questions, councillors? No, there is an officer recommendation in the report. Moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Buckley. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Allen?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The Marina Committee terms of reference is a result of a very careful consideration by the committee, who have endorsed the draft at their last meeting. Over the time, the Marina Committee has evolved into a group that works cooperatively, and it was an evolution. And they work well together, and particularly well with council staff. They provide positive feedback on a number of issues and generally give of their time freely and I thank them for their dedication. The draft sets out more clearly the role of the committee and its members and the obligation of members to attend meetings. The draft sets out how members are elected, sets an order of rotation, and more importantly than anything as an improvement on the committee, sets out the ability for a member who hasn't participated over a 3-meeting cycle to be removed because there's been issues consistently with quorums, particularly because of the absence of one member. So in urging councillors to support the motion, I'll also take the opportunity to thank Chris and his staff for the great job that they do in a very cheerful and efficient and safe way in managing our marinas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, look, I think it's committees are such an important part of having that community engagement and the advice filtering through to councillors, you know, via the chairs. And I really support this. I think there was a time that this potentially would have been, you know, canned and not a process anymore, and something a lot more informal. And I think the community fought back against that, and it was very clear that they wanted to remain, you know, part of this committee. So I hope, you know, councillors will support this with the merit and the good grace that it's been presented with us this evening. And I, for one, wouldn't mind going for a sail soon when it warms up a bit. So thank you, Mayor. Throwing it back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Certainly plenty of wind out there at the moment for that. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. On to item 5.1.3, which is S11A, Instrument of Appointment and Authorisation through the Planning and Environment Act 1997. This sits in our Business Excellence Directorate. Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. The report before you is seeking the appointment of one new authorised officer under the Act because we have a new statutory planner, Rob Buckmaster, who has joined us. So in most cases, authorised officers can be appointed by the CEO. For this particular Act, being the Planning and Environment Act, we need a resolution of Council to be able to appoint them as an authorised officer so they can get on with doing the things that we've been talking about tonight. So I won't dwell on the report any more than that. The rest of it's with you for consideration.
Are there any questions, councillors? No. Do we have a mover? There is a motion there. Councillor Stowe, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Greason. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Greason?
No, this is procedural. Thank you.
Is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors, and that is carried unanimously. Very good. Okay, we're now up to agenda item number 6, which is matters of urgent business. CEO, do we have any urgent business matters to consider this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. There is none.
Very good. Now, I believe the next agenda items are, in fact, confidential in nature. So, councillors, I'll just need a motion to move into confidential business pursuant to section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following items: 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. Happy for you to move that. Councillor Allen, seconded. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Is Councillor Buckley, no. Is the motion opposed? No. Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No. Put the motion to the vote, and that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And for those members of the public, we will come back after this confidential deliberation. Thank you. Just waiting for the confirmation that we're back on YouTube. Very good. Welcome back, everybody. Agenda item number 8, the final item for this evening's meeting is the meeting close. So a big thank you from myself, the Chair, on behalf of councillors and 2 councillors for your participation, officers. We couldn't do what we do without you. A special mention to everybody involved in all those planning scheme amendments. That is a monstrous amount of work. To have got that across the line is an achievement. Bless you, Councillor Buckley. And councillors, that concludes the meeting for this evening. Thank you to everybody online who's still with us. Have a pleasant evening. I'll now declare the meeting closed.
Well done. Good evening, Mayor. Good night, everyone.